we go.
Boy reviews.
Bueller. 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 Hello, Boring Review Nation. Gabe.
Nick.
He's like, that's my cue. Welcome back to the channel, guys. And today we are bringing you a very, very special treat. Okay, we're gonna embark on a new, hopefully, a new segment called Throwback Thursdays.
Throwback Thursday, baby.
You know, we initially had the idea a few months ago, or maybe a month ago, when somebody was like, hey man, you guys did a review on Cholet and it was awesome, you should be doing some Indian classics. And then we went and saw Dewar, which is amazing as well. And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, Netflix has started throwing out a lot of throwbacks. Maybe they just got the rights to them, they needed content, but all of Back to the Future, which is an American classic. This thing's a gem, a cinema gem, okay, is on there. And I'm with my kids and my wife the other day. It's like, hey, let's throw this on. And like the first 4 or 5 minutes of it, they're like, oh, this is cheesy. You know what I'm saying? Like my teenagers.
How dare they?
Dude, you know, with the song
guitar
at the beginning. Yeah. And then
I
all
love
of a sudden,
that song.
When they got into it, they're like, oh, this movie's awesome. And I was like, you know, here's the thing. You know, a movie's a classic when it's referenced basically in other movies. Like so many films we've watched recently were Indian films. All of a sudden you hear them saying, oh, Cholet, or Dewar. In Super 30, you know, he's talking about what movie have you seen? And they mentioned Cholet, right? And it's the same thing. In Avengers Endgame, remember when he was like, please tell me your whole
Back to the Future lied to me.
Exactly, bro. So
Ready Player One, the dude's driving around in the DeLorean.
You know,
and
it's
the Goldbergs, a TV show. They're talking about the DeLorean and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's been referenced so many times.
So it becomes a part of pop culture. So we figure this way, we give everybody a chance to live in our eyes, so to speak, or walk in our shoes. And with these movies we grew up with in the 70s, well, not 70s, I didn't grow up in the 70s, but the 80s and 90s that have become a part of pop culture and that are heavily referenced. So even if you haven't seen it before, you're like, oh, I know what that's from. And, you know, maybe it'll catch on.
Dude, Back to the Future, for anyone that may not know, is one of the greatest films ever made. And I would almost go as far as say that's fact. That's not even opinion. So many people that have seen this movie, even if they're not a huge cinemaphile, they love Back to the Future. And, you know, quite admittedly, Back to the Future, the first one, is the best one in the whole trilogy. The other two I really enjoy. But the first one is just such a near perfect film as far as entertainment. It is pure entertainment. Can you find plot holes? Of course you can. Can you find characters that you don't necessarily love? Of course you can. But you have an ultimate good guy, a likable good guy in Marty McFly with a wonderful name. And then you have the ultimate bad guy in Biff Tannen. And, you know, Thomas Wilson plays Biff Tannen so well. Go on YouTube, type in Thomas Wilson stand-up. He does stand-up comedy, and you would say, that's the same guy that played Biff. He's hilarious. He looks a little different, but he does a great job of playing Biff. And like you said, so many quotable lines. McFly, hello, anybody home? Think, McFly, think. I got to have my things retyped. Anyway, I mean, this guy goes off and on. But this movie, for me in particular, it's my 4th favorite movie of all time. It's funny because Gabe, he texted me yesterday. He's like, hey, let's do a Throwback Thursday on Back to the Future. I just watched with my family. And I'm like, you know what? I noticed it was on Netflix. And so I watched it myself a few days ago as well. So it was kind of funny. Me and my family had just finished the second one because when the first one ends, you got Doc coming in and saying, it's your kids, Marty. Something's got to be done about your kids. And then you get that cliffhanger. And my daughter's like, what happens to the kids? And so they wanted to watch it. And so we watched the second one yesterday. But anyways, this movie, for anyone that doesn't know, really, really quick, this involves a young man and his best friend who's an older scientist. The scientist creates a time machine out of a DeLorean car, very famous car in the 80s, but didn't really last too long because it wasn't reliable. And McFly happens to accidentally get the time machine as they're trying to escape some terrorists. He goes through time, hit 88 miles per hour in the DeLorean, and he goes back to 1955. He runs into his parents, and he causes, when they first meet and they begin to fall in love, he gets in the way of that. And so now he finds himself where his dad is not on his mom's radar, and it's him who's on his mom's radar because of the whole Florence Nightingale. Again, I'm not going to go too much into it, but it's a time travel movie. For me, this was the first time travel movie I loved, and I love all time travel movies. If it's time travel, I'm going to give it a shot. This one did it the best possible. They really tried to stick close to the rules that they established in this film, and the rules of if you affect the past in any way without fixing it, it's going to have serious repercussions in the future. And for Marty in particular, he got in the way of his parents meeting and falling in love, and so he's thinking about himself never existing ever again. There's so many different conflicts that happen in this movie, but for me, it's just sheer entertainment. It's hilarious. You just have a big smile on your face when you're watching it. I feel like anyone can relate to this film in some way, shape, or form. Who would not want to go back in time and see their parents at their awkward stage of when they're in high school, senior year? Who would not want to sit there like he does when he stares at his dad in the diner and he's like, "You're George McFly." And the guy's like, "Yeah, so." He sees his dad all young before he's, worn down by life and whatnot. It's just, for me, I fantasize about it a million times. I would love to go back in time and see what my dad was like when he was 18 or 17, what my mom was like. And not that I want to get involved with their love triangle or anything like that, but I would just like to see what they were like at that time. This movie is just so much fun.
I think that this is the thing about this movie. It was the very first movie where I remember them. Even when I first saw it, like, wow, the story was told so well. Okay, the foreshadowing, the plot was so well, because a lot of the things about how his mom and father first met, you get like in the first 5 minutes of the movie, and you don't even realize it's important. You don't realize it's important, or you don't realize it's going to play a role. It's really inconsequential, the throwaway line, until later on. You're like, oh, this is what happened. And there's so many little things like that, so many little callbacks to stories that his parents would tell him to how it was in the back, and then some things that weren't necessarily true. Like his mom's giving him all this hard time about his girlfriend, because his girlfriend and Marty McFly we're talking about in current day and present day is like, oh, she's calling him at home. She's like, any girl that calls a boy at home is just looking for trouble. Yet you find out back in the day when he goes back in time that his mom was quick. His mom was a floozy.
This is not the first time I've parked in a car with a boy. She snuck the liquor from my mother's liquor cabinet.
Dude, it was just like so many things like that. Like you said, this movie is so enjoyable, and the most thing I could say is story. The story is written so well, and there's so many different nuances in there. Even, again, I love the bad guys. Okay, Biff Tannen is so funny, bro, and probably my favorite part of Biff is actually in the second one, not in the first one, but in the second Back to the Future, when Biff meets young Biff or whatnot, because he gets the joke wrong, not the joke, but he gets the saying wrong all the time. He's like, "Hey, why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?"
It's leave, you idiot. You make like a tree and leave. You sound like a dang fool when you get it wrong.
You know what I mean, dude? Like, that's like one of probably the best parts of, to me. I know the first one is a classic and it is the best one, but I like Biff specifically in Back to the Future Part 2. His character when he's interacting with his younger son is so much fun. Dude, but
I can't tell you how many times I've said the word butthead in my life talking, and it's almost like a word of endearment for my family. Like I've said that probably a billion times in my life, and it's because of this movie.
Dude, it has so many lines that people don't even realize. 1.21 gigawatts, where it comes from.
A gigawatt.
Oh, great Scott. You know what I mean? Just so many throwaway lines. Guys, on Netflix, I guarantee you, sit down with the family, pop some popcorn and enjoy it. It's a great family film. It's definitely a classic. And, Michael J. Fox's best work, in my opinion. I mean, I know he's famous for doing other things, Teen Wolf, but, Facts of Life. Facts of Life, the first thing Michael J. Fox did, huh?
Yeah.
The show, The Facts of Life, right?
Let's talk about some cool, fun facts that I've learned in the recent years on Back to the Future. First of all, Back to the Future the first half of the movie was recorded with a different actor playing Marty McFly, an actor named Eric Stoltz. Did you not know that? So
No.
they wanted Michael J. Fox because he was awesome in Facts of Life as Alex Keaton. And if you haven't seen it, you got to check it out. I'm sure it's on Netflix or something somewhere. But they wanted him, but they couldn't because he was contractually obligated to Facts of Life. And so they went and got Eric Stoltz, who's a good character actor, who's an anaconda, and a million other things. But the director and the producer and the writer, Gail, Robert Zemeckis and Gail, they realized that it just wasn't working, that the chemistry wasn't there, and that Stoltz was taking more of a stoic approach than a more fun comedic approach to it. And so they made the hard decision of firing him halfway through production. They just got rid of him.
Wow.
And if you watch some podcast from Thomas Wilson who played Biff Tannen, he was more than happy about it because he said there's a few times he was this close to punch him in the face because Stoltz was kind of like a method actor and he took things way too seriously and he demanded to be called this or that. And so they fired him. They went after Michael J. Fox again, and Michael J. Fox wanted to do it so bad that he worked it out with his contract where he said, yes, the day is still a fact of life, but you can't make me not record at nighttime. So no joke, this guy would work a full day on Facts of Life. They would pick him up and he'd work most of the night on Back to the Future, get maybe a few hours of sleep each night. And so a lot of the scenes that you see him in, there are a lot of night scenes just for that reason, or in a well-lit studio. And so that's one big thing. Another big thing is they first wanted the time machine to be a refrigerator. Can you imagine that? A refrigerator. That was in the original script, or one of the first original scripts. And they started talking about, they said, we don't need kids going in refrigerators and locking themselves inside. So let's change that. And thank goodness they did, because the DeLorean is such a cool looking car and such a cool looking time machine. Could you imagine the refrigerator, for crying out loud? There's so many other things. If you notice in, I just lost it, but there's so many other cool things about this movie that I can't get through all of it, but it's going to come back to me. But there's just so many fun things. It's a movie that you can rewatch over and over and over. And like you said, catch those little conversations with his mom in the beginning or this or that. I can't say enough about how much I love this. Oh, another thing, Huey Lewis in the News, who does the song Power of Love and a few other songs in the soundtrack. He is one of the teachers who's judging Marty when he does his guitar audition. And he says, sorry, you're just too darn loud. That's the lead singer of Huey Lewis in the News. So that's another inside joke, that here's a lead singer of a rock and roll group who's telling this guy, you're just too darn loud.
I love how Marty, was quote unquote the inspiration for rock and roll, because later on, he's like one of the musicians that's playing at a school dance who's playing with Marty McFly. They sees him playing music, so he immediately calls his cousin, and he's like, "Hey Chuck, it's your cousin Marvin Berry." So now you're like, oh, this is Chuck Berry's cousin. And that's supposedly where they got the idea. I mean, so many cool, again, foreshadowing and story. It is masterful in this movie. Are there some small plot holes? Yes. Anytime you delve into a movie that has anything to do with time travel, it's a Pandora's box. Don't even think about it too much, because forget about it. There's going to be plot holes. But as far as foreshadowing and plot devices being in there, not just, oh, it happened because it happened. No, they really thought this out, and the story is amazing. It's a lot of fun. Like you said, 30 plus years later, okay, I'm almost 40 now, so I probably started this movie when I was 9 or 10 years old. 30 years later, I'm enjoying this thing and sitting down with my family, my kids, and they're enjoying it, and the jokes are hitting. And man, watch it. It's on Netflix. I was gonna say it's free, but Netflix isn't free. But then again, how many subscribers does Netflix have? I mean, everybody has a Netflix account. Or if not, somebody that has a Netflix account.
Yeah, saying one way, shape, or form. The other thing about this is it really highlights the skills of Christopher Lloyd as an actor. When I was a kid watching Back to the Future, I thought Christopher Lloyd was a superstar. You go in the histories of cinema and acting, he never really was a superstar. He was in a show called Taxi, which was a huge hit in the 70s, and he was a part of that. He was in a few other movies and whatnot that, he had his way. He was the villain in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He was also the villain in another movie. So, I mean, he made his way around the block, but Back to the Future is where he really, really shined. And, I mean, he's You can't think of anyone playing his role, and you can't think of anyone playing Marty McFly's role besides those two guys. And then you also have like this odd couple situation with these two main characters, one old, one young. We never really find out how these two guys meet, but it doesn't really matter. We don't care because we love their friendship. We love the way it works. Like you said, a lot of plot holes, but who cares about that? They really put a lot of time into trying to make this work. And it's a movie that, I mean, I'm not really going to grade it because there's no point. A plus, obviously. I love this stinking film. But this movie, I just want to end on this. I remember me and my family were out in the mountains one winter on a short little vacation. And we went to the grocery store to get groceries for the week. And so me and my dad and my older brother, we were walking down the aisle. And no joke, this was in like Big Bear, California or something. We're going down the aisles. And we stopped to think, do we have everything that we need? It's three guys, three knuckleheads. We don't really do the grocery shopping, so we're not sure what we need. So we're sitting there thinking about it. And we see this other dad and his son and their cart just like 5 feet away. And this dad, he must have like got mad at his son for something. Because no joke, we hear the next second with him hitting his son's head. Hello, McFly, anybody home? We were dying. We were cracking up. This is like 13 years after the movie came out. We couldn't believe that this guy was just busting on his son, and he was dead serious. He was so disappointed with him for not remembering some.
That is, I mean, dude, that's a perfect end. This again, so many references in pop culture come straight out of this movie, and as far as a classic is concerned, it definitely is. So go ahead and give it a watch. Let us know in the comments below what you think after you watch it. If you've already seen it, what you think. And yeah, man.
And I want to know who has not seen it. Comment in the section, or leave a comment in the comment section. If you don't plan on watching, I want to know who has never seen Back to the Future. And if you haven't, let us know if we've convinced you enough to check it out. We don't get any royalties from you watching the movie, obviously, but we just want you to enjoy this movie for what it is. All the sequels are on Netflix. They're not as good as the first one, but they're still really good sequels and follow-ups. And if you are interested and you haven't seen it before, the second and the third one were shot back to back. And so they have a story that are connected to each other. So it kind of makes it even more fun. I love how the second one ends, and I like the third one a lot. But the first one is cinema gold.
Well, until next time, guys. Great Scott!
This is heavy.